Welcome to Puro Politics, the political podcast of the San Antonio Express News. My name is Joleen Garcia, Metro columnist, and I'm joined by
City Hall reporter Joshua Fechter,
business columnist and editor Greg Jefferson,
investigative reporter Brian Chasnoff.
And we're happy today to be joined by our special guest, Joleen Garcia, who is a community organizer with the Texas Organizing Project. She's also been a driving force with the Free Speech Coalition, was the executive director of the Martinez Street Women's Center. And Joleen, I think you managed a city council campaign too, didn't you, for Rick Trevino a few years back? Is that right?
I did, yes. I've done a couple.
Done a couple. What was the other one?
Delicia Herrera.
Oh, okay. Well, we're thank you so much for joining us today. And I wanted to talk, before we start going into some of the issues that we're going to talk about, I wanted to mention that, you're here kind of speaking on your own behalf. I know you want it to be clear that whatever you say, you're not representing Texas Organizing Project, but just kind of your own views on things, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. TOP has its membership process that takes positions on issues. And so I'm not representing the members here. I am representing myself.
Well, having said that, I wanted to start talking a little bit about, the election. Last week, we started early voting. We're seeing incredible turnout nationally. And I think Texas is been really remarkable. I mean, we're through the first 5 days of early voting, we had 3.9 million votes cast, which is like 43% of the total turnout for Texas in 2016. In Bexar County, I think through Sunday, we had, I think it was 207,000 turning out. So it's been an amazing thing to watch. And one of the things that we've seen happen recently was 2 weeks ago, Texas Organizing Project formed a coalition with Move Texas in filing a lawsuit against the Bexar County Elections Department. And the issue really was that when Bexar County Elections Department came up with this new vote center system where people on election day could vote at any location rather than the one assigned location, which had been the rule before, that in doing so, they also decided to close some polling sites, reduce the number of polling sites. And TOP and Move Texas filed a lawsuit. And last week, Judge Karen Poza granted a temporary injunction, which will basically have the effect of requiring the elections department to add 18 election sites this is just for election day. Joleen, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, your perspective on that, the lawsuit, and your concerns that you might have had about whether there was, voters were being given enough options or there was enough accessibility for voters.
Well, you can tell from the excitement, on the first day of early voting and seeing that excitement continue, that we want to make every possible effort to make sure that people have access to their right to vote. And having more polling sites that are more convenient for folks to be able to access it, whether you are rushing home from work to try to vote, or you have children and you have been unable to access your vote until election day. Whatever is the case, you should not have to travel extreme, lengths to be able to exercise your right to vote. So it was very important for us to maintain the number of voting sites that we had previously so that people could be able to vote.
Yeah, one of the things that Judge Poza cited, I think there was a study that found that even when people had to just drive maybe a quarter of a mile further, that turnout went down quite a bit. That it really affected people if you increased the distance that they had to go. And I think that's one of the things that made her that convinced her to make the ruling that she did. One of the big things that's on the ballot is the workforce development proposition, which is something that Mayor Ron Nirenberg has championed. I mean, we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic that it's just intensified the issues that we've had with income inequality in this city. And I wanted to get your take on this proposition and whether you think this is the right approach to deal with a problem that we can all see has been a chronic problem in San Antonio.
Thank you for that question. I believe this is an important, critical issue. First of all, workforce development as a tactic for addressing economic disparity has not been successful. Actually, there are a lot of experts that have said that it's not the skills gap that we should be focusing on. It really is an opportunity gap. So we have people from marginalized communities, whether it be Black, Indigenous, people of color, women, all going through different programs, right? But when you get to a level, a skill level, you're not able to land the jobs due to discrimination. You get paid less. There's just less opportunity overall. And even folks that have, brilliant ideas from our community that want to start their own business, they don't get the investment that they deserve. And so there's just a lack of opportunity that results in economic disparity on the economic policy end. But I mean, also think about education and the many other barriers that marginalized communities face. Workforce development isn't the solution that we need to overcome that. There's a whole bunch of other things that I think is troublesome and concerning about the plan. Another thing is the lack of public input. If you're going to put together a plan, you definitely want to include the people that are going to be the focus of this plan. Instead of including the very people that it proposes to serve, the Proposition B group decided to bring together a long list of the business elite, the business leaders in our community who have been the same people creating the economic, disparity that we see here today. So, it's not, and I'll try to close with this. Well, it's not that, this economy right now, we've realized this through the pandemic, and we've realized it before, many, many people, is that the economy penalizes the most vulnerable, the low wage workers.
Right.
We need an economy that shifts from that, an economy that praises and enriches the already very wealthy, to an economy that centers workers, that provides living wages to all, especially hourly workers who now we've seen that they're essential. They're the grocery workers. They're the people that take care of our children, the people that take care of our elders. They're the people, in doing hourly work in healthcare, the maintenance people. All of these folks deserve living wages and health insurance and benefits like paid sick leave. And this workforce development program is not going to accomplish that.
So would you rather see the revenue from that sales tax go just directly to VIA? I mean, is that maybe a better answer to, at least in some way addressing income inequality?
Well, I think that's a false choice. I believe that first and foremost, we should have had the choice to protect the aquifer. First and foremost, that choice was taken away by the city council, and the public has chosen to protect the aquifer because we know that it's a foundation for all of us. We all need water, and we all, especially the most low income folks in our community, cannot afford a SAWS rate hike. And, prices keep on going up, but our wages don't. And so we should have been able to vote on the aquifer plan. And VIA, has its own challenges, I believe, in serving the community. I think we need a better public transit system. And I think we need to bring actual VIA riders and working families to the table to be able to do that. And I'll say this as well, is that we need an economy and a transportation system that centers Black, Indigenous, people of color. We don't need an economy that continues to bring the same folks around the table to think of solutions to what ails us, because we're never going to get a different response or a different solution if we don't bring different people to the table.
So where are we now on the paid sick leave situation, court battle?
Well, it's been caught up in the courts. The courts were looking to the Texas Supreme Court to provide guidance on it, but it has been pushed back to the Fourth Court of Appeals. So we're waiting in the courts. But one of the things that I think the city council can do during a pandemic, they can put in place emergency paid sick leave measures that would require more employers to provide this very essential benefit, right? We have seen how essential it is during this pandemic. And the truth is that the city council hasn't taken steps to make paid sick leave more widespread. And that's unfortunate.
What other steps you talked about? Your view that the sales tax approach with workforce development is not the right solution. What are things? Obviously, the city government has some limitations on what it's able to do. What steps would you like to see the city government take as soon as possible to try to address what you talked about as being a lack of opportunity that exists in the community?
Well, I think it can start with those that contract with the city very easily, right? We can require that all contractors provide paid sick leave. I think we also do a lot of business with contracting out to nonprofits. I think the nonprofit sector should rise to the level of providing paid sick leave for all workers. And then I think that the city should, in its leadership, pull together folks to put in place in the community. Like, we can do so much outside of the government process if we really want to, right? Like, you can see, folks creating programs to provide COVID rapid tests or COVID tests to whole swaths of the community, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we can do things outside of the government process. And I believe that we can help incentivize paid sick leave for companies. And I think we can also create a standard within our community that workers be respected, that workers be valued, and that we bring workers to the table to uplift their stories. I think far too often we hear about the great things that business leaders are doing, and we don't hear about the good things, the ingenuity and the skills of our community. And I think that creates an analysis where we don't value workers.
That all strikes me as being kind of outside the bounds of a sales tax election, though. How does that sort of like undergird the sort of the argument against putting this money towards workforce development? Because by their own figures, some people think this is a large figure, others think it's pretty small. I mean, just by their own figures, they're looking at training at least 32,000 people and putting those people into higher wage jobs. So, I mean, is that not an opportunity?
Well, you look at the track record of many of these workforce development programs, and you see that might not be the case, right? And especially, we haven't seen a track record of a workforce development program during a pandemic. And right now, what are the true needs of our community? When we took an analysis of 100,000 folks, like we sent messages to 100,000 folks in our organization at Texas Organizing Project, we heard back that the top things people were concerned about were housing issues and were health issues. So why aren't we using our sales tax revenue to put it to work for issues of housing and issues of health. Because if nothing else, when we come out of this pandemic and we're supposed to be different, create a different economy, we should have housing for everyone. We should have healthcare for everyone, and we should, be able to have access to the most important things that are critical to life, which are food, health, and housing.
We're going to take a short break, and we will be back in a minute.
Be sure to check out other Express News podcasts, such as Express Briefing, hosted by me, Luis Vasquez. Every weekday morning, I'll bring you the top headlines for the day in about 10 minutes or less. You can find Express Briefing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, we're back now. And Joleen, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the issue of police reform. Obviously, over the past few months, there's been an increased attention to, this has been a long-time problem in the United States. And we, as a few months back, saw video of the killing of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer, which really spurred protests across the country, and we've seen other incidents similar to that in the last few months. And in the wake of that, there was controversy within the city of San Antonio because the city decided to increase its police budget by about $7 million. I think the argument from the city was that a lot of the costs of funding the police are sort of locked in via the contract with the police union. But I want to get your take on how the city has responded to this, the movement that we've seen to sort of rethink the way we handle law enforcement across the country. What is your view on that?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to remember the folks that have been directly impacted by police brutality. And you talk about Darrell Zamalt Sr., Charles Rountree, and Marquise Jones. Those names and those families should be with us as we think about the next steps. And I feel like the public outcry that took place as you saw Black community and you saw also a whole slew of a diversity of folks going to the streets, which had never gone to the streets before. And that's phenomenal. How do we convert that into real change, real systemic change? And I feel that the elected leaders and we as leaders in the community, we really should, bring out the new solutions that these families are bringing up with their stories. For instance, it's great to start banning chokeholds, and it's important to do those things. But when you saw that people voiced their support for redirecting funds from the police to housing, to healthcare, to education. And as city leaders, we didn't see that movement. Then I think many folks thought like our city leaders are deaf to our pleas.
Joleen, yeah. Where do you rank the importance of the police union contract that I believe is going to be up for negotiation early next year? Just in terms of reform, do you think that's do you rank that toward the top of a path to reform?
Absolutely, I do. I think that more transparency in the process and more public input into the process would be very helpful. I believe that people from like the Black Futures Collective and from other groups that have come forward, like, the folks that are pulling together the petition drives, like Fix SAPD, we should hear those voices very clearly and find out how we can bring them to the table because they're important for shaping our future. The police union contract, has there needs to be more pressure. Right now, the city leaders aren't responding very well to the pressure that the community is putting out. And I think at some point, the community, I think they're feeling it now that we need other options than just relying on our government officials to come up with solutions for us. And so I think that, we need to envision another way to deal with social problems other than the police department. And I think we as a community could go through that process even before we get to the table with the police department, because that public process could be given enough importance so that when it comes to the police union contract, we've got something to contrast that with. When we talk about what are the essential duties, well, we've got a public process that speaks very loudly to other ways that we can address social problems that typically the police would have addressed. So I think there's another way that we can go. Even before we get to the union contract discussions.
So as part of this, as far as you're concerned, actually reducing the number of officers that we have, I mean, I know that you would like to see a change in the approach and the way the officers sort of interact with the community, but how would you like to see just the police department becomes smaller and have a smaller force?
Well, I think that when you realize that there are less things that the police ought to be handling, then yes, that you'll have more of a community force, right? You'll have more of a community, ownership. I'll give this as an example. One time there was a person that said, well, you know what? After I went through the process of incarceration, I finally had a stop in my life of the many things that were ailing me that caused me to go in sort of this direction that ended up in me being incarcerated. And as a community organizer, this person, stopped and said, hey, why did you have to be incarcerated? Why did you have to be put into a cage in order to have all these things that are ailing you stop all of a sudden? And it just reminded me that we can put a stop to these things before, they get to the point of incarceration or the point of police contact. Why are we not there for the mental health of young men and women? And, we can do that before it gets to that point. So and we were talking about sales tax, right? Our funds should be going in the direction of supporting kids in public schools that are dealing with trauma. And it's so important right now. And I think we can do it.
Joleen,
I wonder how, I actually wonder, there was, when council passed the budget with the increase in police spending, the city manager promised that there would be sort of like this months-long process to sort of reevaluate the police, what residents actually want out of their police department. Last I heard, the city manager and the public safety chair, Councilwoman Cabello Havrda, are still sort of hammering out that process. But I wanted to know, how optimistic are you that it'll actually result in reforms that you would like to see?
Well, until folks are really brought to the table, folks that are directly impacted by police issues. I mean, we've got something, until they're brought to the table, I feel like it's very unlikely they'll come up with solutions that will really address the root of the problem. But let's bring forth a policy that they already have on the table, which is cite and release, that could reduce the interaction of police with the community and reduce incarceration, right? They haven't really fully embraced cite and release. And that is such a very clear program that could help. And with that track record, I am unfortunately, I'm worried and I'm concerned that they are not showing enough willingness, enough power in the direction of change, so that we can see what a systemic change that we really need to address these issues. Because if we just make reforms that look good on paper but really aren't getting at the root of the problem, then we're not going to see the change that we need.
Joleen, before we wrap things up, I was just curious. I wanted to ask if you voted yet, and if so, like what your voting experience was.
Well, I took my parents to vote on the first day. They were very excited and wanted to just honestly get it out of the way, right? My folks are elder. We went to 3 polling sites, and my dad, even though he's in his 70s, still works. And so he had to go to work at 2:00. We went at 8 a.m. and it was way too long. We went again at 12 noon or 11:30. And again, it was longer. We went to 3 different sites on the west side of San Antonio.
Wow.
And so they didn't vote that day. And they ended up voting later that week. But because I have 2 small children, I haven't voted either. We've been here dealing with school and work. But what I do plan to do is I plan to vote this week. And what is important is making a plan, right?
That's right.
So Tuesday, which is tomorrow, is a day that I have a lighter schedule with my work. So I'm going to take some time off, and I'm going to go vote tomorrow.
Well, that sounds good. Good luck with that. Joleen Garcia, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And for everyone listening, we hope you're safe and well. And if you haven't voted, please, as Joleen said, make a plan to vote. And we'll be back with you next week. Take care.